when you look at the numbers, and these colleges are bragging that they have staff to student ratios of 13 to 1, 15 to 1. I went to UCLA and had 500 people in my undergraduate classes. I don't think it's necessary. And as a matter of fact, I remember Mika's daycare having those numbers. Those ratios, are not doing any favors to these kids, because what they're doing is learning how to have somebody else do everything for them instead of them taking more responsibility and getting things done in a hard situation. 13 to 1 faculty ratios doesn't prepare a student for real life.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
As many of the listeners of the podcast may know, that Kim and I have a senior in high school this year. And the class of 2020 is going to be different than any other class that I can imagine experiencing, something that I don't think they ever expected, which is that they may not actually graduate through a ceremony and have their the senior prom and all the things that happen at the end of the year. And we're really sad about that and disappointed, but we understand why the schools had to close. And so we started thinking, we're not alone in this. We know that a lot of other parents, we know a lot of other people and friends throughout the country that are experiencing the same kind of challenges with their own senior or junior in high school, and thinking about what's next and what's going to be happening. So we wanted to record this podcast really to talk about it, about what we're thinking and the things that we're seeing and what we're talking to our clients about as advisors. So why don't we start with that?
Right. What we're talking to our clients and what we're talking to our kids about. Right. So this podcast is going to I may get a little passionate on my conversation, because this really does this is hitting at home right now. And I think about our daughter, Mika, and I think about all of her friends that are going through their senior year. They were so excited to do all the fun, rite of passage activities at the end of the year. And they've all been, for the most part, I think, canceled. I mean, they're not expecting much to happen at the year end, but gosh, we're all hoping that they still get some sort of celebration. So, really crazy time. Our daughter was adamant about not visiting campuses until she actually was accepted, because she did not want to get excited about a campus that she was not going to get into.
Mm-hmm. And so she got into a couple of the schools that she applied to, actually all the schools that she applied to. Yay. But then when the situation came where she needed to make a decision as to which one she would go to, we were originally planning on visiting 2 of the 4 campuses that she applied to over the April break. Unfortunately, pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19 canceled all our plans. And as a result, we've been able to at least participate in the virtual events that these universities have put together to share more about the school, share more about the major, including interviews and conversations with students that are currently attending these programs. But obviously, it's not the same experience of, doing that through a Zoom meeting as opposed to physically showing up, visiting the campus, getting a sense of the student housing and such. And I know that a lot of friends, family, and others are going through a similar situation. In some cases, they were fortunate enough to visit the campus, and they've made the decision that their kids are going to attend, Cal Poly, or they're going to attend Santa Clara University or other universities throughout the country. The thing is, though, Kim, are those universities going to be open in the fall? And that's the big question mark. Would we want to spend and commit to a 4-year university, and it could be an online experience come September or October?
Yeah, and that's the big risk that I think we don't feel comfortable taking, nor does our daughter Mika. And, you'll hear me over time talk about transparency in our last podcast, we talked about that when it comes to owning stocks. Right now, I want to talk about transparency in finances with your kids. We've done a lot on, breaking money silence. And our daughter, we've always been pretty transparent in terms of we have a budget for her college education. And most colleges that she wants to attend are private and above our budget. Mm-hmm. And so if she's going to go to them, she needs to think about the dollars and cents behind it. And I'm so grateful that we did this. I encourage all parents to give a budget to their kids, be fully transparent what they will pay for, what they don't want to pay for. We have a contract that you can use with your child on our website to show you what you should, everything from travel back and forth to home to the college, who's paying for that, who's paying for the books, and so on and so forth. So be transparent with your children, because that will take a lot of pressure off of you. I know a lot of parents, they hope that their kid goes to a cheaper school, but hope is not an investment strategy. It's not a good thing we recommend with college expenses too. They're very large and it's scary. And so, maybe we were too transparent with my daughter because she gets really stressed about the financing piece of the pie when it comes to college. But it also made her think real seriously about going to a school that she hadn't even seen before. That's a lot of money to spend on a place that she is not emotionally attached to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the other thing, and this is what we'd encourage, and I think it was a major difference in our situation here at home with Mika, was that we needed to have a conversation, because I think that ever since she was little, a toddler, and she understood the importance of school, we've always been very active and proactive in letting her know that, from our estimation, her school days were not going to be over until she got a degree, a bachelor's of something, right? And that college was built into, it was more, her school. So it was like 12 years of primary school, graduate from high school, and then you go to at least 4 or 5 years of post-education, maybe beyond that, depending on what discipline she chooses to follow. And so I kind of sensed that she felt the real pressure, like, I need to go to college. And pressure from the standpoint that she set on herself, too. I mean, she did take all the standardized tests. She studied, she's done well, try to get the good grades so that she'd have more options when it came to the schools that she applied to. But I think one of the things that was a breakthrough for us was sitting down and letting her know that in light of everything that was happening with the pandemic, that our expectations were lowered from the standpoint that we didn't expect that she was going to make a decision and that she was going to start in the fall. And so once we had the conversation and saying, maybe we can explore either a deferral or maybe explore, her taking a gap year and not have to go to school effective fall 2020, but maybe spring 2021 or fall 2021, that provided so much relief in having that conversation, and the pressure was off because it opened up all these other opportunities and options to consider maybe getting a job and working in the area that she wants to focus on and get that work experience and then go to school.
Right. So I think it's important for her, one of our, I think, contracts with her will be, because I think we are going to make a contract of what we expect from her going forward in the new year while she's living at home, is to see that she is still in school and that she is still having a discipline of learning and studying, but at the same time that she's also doing work that blends in with what she wants to do in her career. Mm-hmm. And so she will be in a stronger position. One thing we like to say is, if she does work in her field next year, perhaps she can apply to even more colleges that she didn't expect to even get in because she needed a portfolio of work. And now having an extra year to work on that may increase her chances of that.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, and this is something that we've been really watching, is how universities themselves are preparing for the fact that the freshman class of 2020, or what would be the graduating class 2024 is very likely to be smaller. I think some of the numbers we've seen is maybe a freshman class that's about 15% smaller than they would have expected, which means two things. One is that some of the larger universities may not have, obviously, the population that they expect coming in. And two, that means that community colleges and things that might be a little bit closer to home for people may see an increase in enrollment. And so as a result, a lot of these universities are starting to relax the standards for acceptance, and they are going to need to be more flexible. I know that in the state of California, the UC system, especially for those of you who have parents that are juniors in high school, are doing away with the SAT and the ACT standardized test as a criteria for acceptance.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens here in California with our public school system, because we have such a great university system here. It's very robust. The criticism has been that they have been accepting so many out-of-state students over and above what they're accepting in-state because of the higher tuitions that they get from out-of-state. But I have a feeling more and more out-of-state parents and families are not going to send their kid, to a school in another state if they're going to have to pay a higher tuition for that, and they're uncertain whether they're actually even going to be on that campus or not. Mm-hmm. And so we have to talk about, the university system as we know it is not going to be the same in fall. And that breaks my heart because I absolutely love my university experience. And I think for those that really go into the whole immersion of a college experience, get so much out that in addition to the education, right? So that makes me sad. But it is it is a part of our new normal. And so what we have to do is think, what makes more sense, because university is going to look different in the fall. And I don't think it's just going to look different in the fall, because having online courses is going to change all levels of education forever. There are no more snow day excuses for those schools that are in snow areas. You're not going to cancel school. You're going to take an online day. Mm-hmm. And the high cost of education is already crazy and ripe for disruption. So having more classes online allows more people to be in them. Mm-hmm. I think it also makes people think about, if you're comparing an online education with more of a highly technical school versus a 4-year university, and now you're not even going to get to be in that dorm for the full time or, study in the classrooms. More of your classrooms are going to be online. Well, then who's to say, that makes sense anymore? It's a lot of money to spend on something that you're not getting the same experience.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, that the education system was ripe for disruption, and we were already starting to see some of that even before the pandemic, where people are starting to question what the true value is of a 4-year education. I mean, here locally, I think it was Google that was started saying that they actually weren't expecting or requiring people to have a 4-year degree in order for them to apply for some of the work. That there could be something that says about someone with work experience or entrepreneurial spirit, right? Or a trade school education that isn't necessarily the traditional 4-year college education, that you're right. I think it is time for the education system to really revisit what is the standard going forward, or even if there is a standard going forward.
We need to be more hands-on. We need to develop skills in these kids that they can take and use the next day. I think that that's a huge fear for freshmen, incoming students. That's one of the reasons why Mika chose to apply to the program at Drexel, is because they had co-ops. Mm-hmm. She was actually going to be able to work in her field while going to school. And the rate of people that get jobs from those from those co-ops is so high, it's, in the upper 90 percentile. It eliminated that big stress of, okay, I got a degree, now what?
Well, the funny thing there is it's almost applying business acumen to the the process of going to and receiving a college degree. And what I mean by that is you are challenging Mika to answer for the ROI of attending a specific school before she attends it, because before it was just a default. It's like you just went to a 4-year school because if you didn't, you were unlikely to get a good job. And now you're actually taking that one step further, which is if you do go, can you prove to me that the area of focus of your education is actually going to translate into something that's going to pay you money, an actual career?
Right. One of these drives where we were going to a college fair in her, in the music and arts area, I talked to her on the way back and I said, so Mika, I'm just curious, when you graduate and have a career, is it important to you to make a lot of money, or are you going to be happy just being in a field you love? Like, what are your goals coming out of school? And because I didn't know. And if you don't ask the question, you don't know. And I think it's really important to ask that question. And she said she did want to make a lot of money, enough money to be able to support herself and not have to rely on a spouse for that, and to be comfortable and live a life similar to what we've given her. And so then once she told me, yes, that was important to her, then we had to have a conversation about what salary expectations you can get within her field, and that it's not going to be an easy thing to do. And I probably stressed her out even more. But, these are the realistic conversations that I think is going to put her in a stronger position moving forward. I am not going to tell her she can be anything, do anything, and make any amount of money she wants. It's hard. Reality is, we own a business. It's hard. Things don't just come to anybody. You got to work for it. And having those expectations out there is really important. Okay, so this is the part where we're going to give you a little information on the finances, because there are some things I actually was just reading in an email today from one of the 529 companies that I work with. And that is if you have used 529 to pay for tuition or room and board or housing and food plans, and that money has been returned to you or prorated back to you because your child is in a university and that university did the responsible thing to pay you back or gave you a discount because you didn't have room and board for a couple months, that money can be put back into a 529. And so that's something just important for you to be aware of, because of the tax benefits of it. So let's say, you took out $10,000 this semester for tuition or room and board, but you only used $5,000 of that. You are going to have to square up with the IRS. And so it's really important, whatever you didn't use on education, put back for the next year. So that's one thing really important for all of you who have students in college to think about that. The second thing I want to say is just be there for your children and making those smart financial decisions. Again, this goes back to being transparent with your budget and theirs. We've played this situation. I love numbers, right? No surprise to you. So, I had this chart out and said, okay, if you choose Drexel, this is how much it's going to cost minus the merit money you got. And this is how much I'm going to chip in, and this is how much you're going to need to pay for. And we went through that with each school so she could see what the numbers really were. And, what we learned in our situation is if she can take a few classes at a junior college and still apply as a freshman, but come in with units, if she finishes college in 3 years as opposed to 4, she may not need any debt, and she may not go into debt for her college tuition, which is so important to her. She does not like debt. We gave her one money lesson where we lent her money, and it was a bad experience for her. So thankfully, she doesn't want debt. She knows that it's not free money. You have to pay it back eventually. And so talk about that with your kids too. Have a discussion. Maybe even give them a loan for a new computer or something, just so they understand what a loan is before they sign on the dotted line for all this student debt.
Yeah. And a lot of what you're talking about, Kim, is really dealing with like the numbers and the conversation that is in the bottom line, the kind of thing that you'll either get a whiteboard or a piece of paper and a pencil, if you still use a pencil, and start doing the math and taking a look at that. And especially if you're considering, a couple of different universities, this is an exercise that we're running with her, especially after we do, and we will be visiting the campuses, is just kind of doing the pros and the cons and the numbers. But even before getting all that, the one lesson I learned, and this goes back to, breaking that money silence and having that conversation with her, was just gauging the emotional aspect. She's dealing with, in her case, the loss of of the rites of passage that come with being a senior year. And so I think she was just anxious, and there was a little bit of anxiety that came with this thrust of senior year cut short, and all of a sudden I'm a college student,
Right.
and not having a real transition. So it's almost gauging that emotional core. And
Yeah.
I've gotten more sensitive about that.
And I will
thanks to you.
and I will say to parents, don't submit to that pressure, that peer pressure that we all know is out there. We want to talk about how our child is going to the best 4-year university and brag to our friends out there. Don't submit to that pressure, because we're in a different environment right now, and that may not make sense. And I go back to saying education is so expensive right now. And I am going to say it. You've heard me say this more times than once today. But when you look at the numbers, and these colleges are bragging that they have staff to student ratios of 13-1, 15-1. I went to UCLA and had 500 people in my undergraduate classes. I don't think it's necessary. And as a matter of fact, I remember Mika's daycare having those numbers. Those ratios, are not doing any favors to these kids, because what they're doing is learning how to have somebody else do everything for them instead of them taking more responsibility and getting things done in a hard situation. 13-1 faculty ratios doesn't prepare a student for real life.
What else I think gave Mika a lot of comfort, gave us comfort, was you talk about, talking to other parents and other students and wanting the best for your child. But what did provide some comfort is as we were talking to Mika, and then she was checking in with her friends, and then we were checking with other parents, we found out that we weren't alone in thinking about either deferring, gap year, not going to the school in another state, but staying local, at least for the first 2 years, getting those general education credits, at a much lower unit cost, and graduating still in 4 years, but maybe only going to the final 2 years of a 4-year program. So I think that provided a lot of comfort in saying, we're not the only ones that are thinking about this, obviously. And it's part of the reason why we wanted to have this podcast, which was to say, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're talking about. And so if you have questions, if you are interested in exploring this, that we're here, to have as a partner in that conversation, and it's very close to home for us.
It is, and I'm very passionate about the topic, so I love talking about it. And we do have, planning sessions that are focused around just college planning. So if that is something that you need help with because, you aren't the numbers person to think through all of the costs involved and who's going to pay for what, that is definitely something that, is within the realm of financial planning for us.
Mm-hmm. And of course, for those of you that may have younger children at home that are still years away from even high school or, maybe contributing to a 529 plan or some sort of college education savings, this is to say, to be mindful of the fact that the education system is evolving and changing. And I think that this pandemic experience that we're probably going to experience, not just for this year, but maybe even to the next year, will have, some repercussions, almost like an aftershock in the entire education system for years to come. And so it's just being mindful of what could come of that as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how they evolve because I think the time is right. Who would have thought that education would have moved online in a matter of weeks? It's crazy.
Well, as you pointed out, it's still pretty much based on agrarian roots, and so it was prime for disruption.
And if parents asked for that disruption, it would have taken decades for it to happen, and now it just happened in a week.
Wow!
And adjustments made in a month, and so they can do it.
They can. Well, we hope you found this podcast useful, if nothing else, to provide you with some things to think about or things to consider. And as always, we are here to support you in these very big decisions for you and your family and your loved ones. So if you'd like to continue the conversation, please contact us. The contact us information is available on our website. We'll also create a link on the show notes for you to be able to schedule some time with us. We have 15 and 30-minute sessions available just to have that conversation, and we're here for you.
Yes, and congratulations to all the class of 2020 seniors out there. We know you worked hard, and we recognize it, even if you don't have those activities at school.
You will celebrate, and we'll celebrate with you. So thanks again for joining us on Tech Girl Financial Podcast, and we'll see you soon.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies.